You know, I really love this time of year. It's the kind of weather that's perfect for just coming out and enjoying being outside. Not so hot, not so cold. And I'm a big walker. I like to get out in the neighborhood and walk around and just ponder a lot of things. That's when I do my best reflection and thinking, and oftentimes it's when I feel most closely connected to God. That's when I feel as though there's no distraction around me. It's just me and the Lord, and I'm just communing with Him. And that's what I've sort of been doing today. Not sort of, I have been. And I've been reflecting on this blog article, this post that I've written. Because, you know, we kid ourselves if we assume that life is always going to be perfect. We don't live in a world that's perfect, and we certainly can't expect the circumstances of our lives to be perfect. In fact, we can expect just the opposite, that things are going to go awry. Things are not always going to be well. Now, granted, there are times in our lives when things are really well and things are going the way we want them to go. But there are those times when it seems that things are sort of spiraling out of control, that we feel that we've lost the grip, and that we just simply don't know what to do. There are times, I've been pondering this morning, when it seems like the bad things are winning, that the evil one is ruling the day in our lives. There are times, seemingly, that evil is winning. Now, when I say evil, I'm not talking about the corruption of sin, even though that could be it. But I'm talking about just when everything is just falling apart, and it's hard not to have our focus on God because there's so much going on in our life, and the evil one has used the circumstances of our lives to draw our attention away from God. And so I've been pondering the question, not that I'm going through something like this in my life right now, but I've certainly been there. But I've been pondering, what is it that you do when evil seems to win? And I hope that you're reading the blog post. That's, you know, the link to it is right under the article here if you're watching this on YouTube. It's right under the video here if you're watching this on video on YouTube, or it's simply right here on the web page if you're watching this on the web post itself, on the blog itself. But the real question I've been asking, as you may have been reading this, is what do you do when evil seems to win? And really there's just two things that dominate my thinking that I know are true. And the first thing you have to do is simply have to rely on the truth of God's Word. And in the blog post, I've got some scriptures that are related to that. And we need to speak the truth. We need to acknowledge the truth. We need to never compromise the truth of God's Word, that God has promised that we are going to have His presence in spite of the negativity of life. That God has promised that He would never forsake us, that no matter what life throws our way, He will never forsake us. In spite of the fact that the evil one will try to distract us and move us away from a reliance on God, God has said, I will never, ever leave you. I will never forsake you. I will always be right there. That is the truth of God's Word, along with many others. As it says in Ephesians 4, we want to speak the truth in love. So if we're dealing with people in our lives that seem to be misconstruing us or thinking ill of us, or we're in some kind of a combative relationship with one another, we don't ever want to be drawn into an argument of conflict. We want to speak the truth to people lovingly and graciously. We want to share Christ. We want to share our heart. And if we need to be forgiven, we need to ask for forgiveness. If they need to be forgiven, then we need to offer forgiveness to them. We want to live on the truth of God's Word in spite of the difficulties that life throws our way. And the second thing we want to do is trust every situation to God. Not only rely on the truth of God's Word, but trust the situation to God. One of my favorite verses in all the Bible is James chapter 1, where it says, "Consider it joy, my brothers, knowing that the testing of your faith will produce an endurance." So often we think that when we get in the midst of a difficulty that what we're supposed to do is pray our way out of it. Pray and ask God to remove it. So often when things go bad, the first thing we start doing is praying and asking God to get us out of it, and asking others to pray that God will get us out of it. But James chapter 1 conveys the idea that we should have a joyous heart during a time of testing and difficulty. because we know that God can and likely will use that situation to produce in us an endurance, an ability to keep going on and getting stronger. So when evil seems to win and evil seems to be ruling the day, we can rely on the truth of God's word, that God will be with us and that he's giving us the ability to speak truthfully and claim the truths of his word. But he's also giving us an ability and a trust in that situation that God is actually going to use the bad circumstance, the bad situation, for his greater glory, to mold us and fashion us into the people that he wants us to be. I mean, how often do you really think about that? That evil can be used by God for a greater blessing. That's what Romans 8:28 says, isn't it? For God causes all things to work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purposes. Just a little food for thought today. When evil seems to win, rely on the truth of God's word. Trust the situation to God. And I believe all will be well. This is Tony Guthrie. All the best.